Girl sees Vulture and Snake fighting over unconscious millionaire. Then she does this. Comment what you thought of this story with a rating from 0 to 10 and tell me what city you're watching from. I really want to know if you like my story and get to know you better, so subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The midday sun punished the dusty streets of downtown Oak Creek as little Lily walked barefoot among the people who hurried past, ignoring her presence. At 4 years old, the girl had already learned that the world was a place where she had to fight to survive. Her brown hair was tangled, the faded pink dress hung loosely on her thin little body. But her dark eyes shone with a determination that would impress any adult who bothered to truly look at her. For 2 months, ever since the raging floodwaters had separated her from her grandmother Eleanor, Lily had learned to find food in the leftovers from diner tables, to sleep under awnings, and to run whenever an adult threatened to take her to the city shelter. She had promised her grandmother she would be strong, and with each passing day, that promise became harder to keep. That Thursday afternoon, while looking for something to eat near the central square, a strange movement caught her attention. In the middle of the square, where normally only pigeons and homeless people gathered, there was a scene that made her eyes widen in surprise and horror. A man in a grey suit was lying on the ground, motionless, while a large black vulture pecked at something shiny in his right hand. On the other side, a coral snake was approaching slowly, also interested in the gleaming object. The few passers-by who crossed the square averted their gaze, quickening their pace as if they didn't want to get involved with another one of the city's problems. Lily paused for a moment, watching the bizarre scene. The man looked different from the homeless people she knew. His clothes were expensive, his shoes shone even when covered in dust, and there was something in his posture, even unconscious, that indicated he didn't belong there. Without a second thought, the girl ran towards the man. Her courageous personality, forged by 2 months of survival on the streets, didn't allow her to stand by when someone was in danger. Shouting and clapping her hands, she scared away the vulture, which flew heavily to a nearby tree. The snake, startled by the sudden movement, quickly slithered into the bushes. The man was unconscious but breathing. Lily knelt beside him, noticing he was firmly holding a small golden key, so tight in his fist that his knuckles were white. She lightly touched his face, feeling that it was too hot, feverish. "Help! Help!" the girl shouted with her thin but powerful voice. "Someone's hurt here." A few people began to approach, curious but hesitant. Lily didn't leave the man's side, protecting him like a small guardian angel, until someone finally called an ambulance. At Oak Creek General Hospital, the bustle was as intense as ever. Nurses rushed through the crowded corridors, doctors shouted instructions, and the smell of disinfectant mixed with human sweat created a heavy atmosphere that made any healthy person want to run out. James Sinclair, 58 years old, woke up 3 days later in a hospital bed, confused and disoriented. His head throbbed as if 1,000 hammers were simultaneously striking his skull. When he tried to remember how he had ended, up there he found only a frightening void where his memories of the last few months should have been. Nurse Brenda, a sturdy, middle-aged woman, explained that he had been found unconscious in the central square by a street child. James tried to process this information, but it was like trying to assemble a puzzle with half the pieces missing. "My wife. Where is my wife?" he asked in a hoarse voice. "Mrs. Catherine was notified, sir. She said she's taking care of business and will visit when she can." Something in that answer didn't sound right to James, but he couldn't understand what. It was like having a word on the tip of his tongue and not being able to say it. In the same hospital, in a wing for social cases, Lily was admitted with severe malnutrition. The social worker had insisted on keeping her under observation, but the girl refused to talk about her family or where she lived. She spent her days walking the halls, observing everything with silent curiosity. It was during one of these walks that she saw the man she had saved in the square. James was sitting on the edge of the bed, holding his head in his hands, clearly in distress. Lily approached slowly, as she did with the injured animals she sometimes found on the streets. "Mister, are you okay?" she asked in her sweet voice. James looked up and saw a thin little girl with large, expressive eyes, looking at him with genuine concern. Something in his chest warmed, a strange sensation he couldn't identify. "Are you the girl who found me?" he asked. Lily nodded, coming closer. "You were holding this," she said, pulling the small golden key from the pocket of her dress. "I kept it for you." James took the key, feeling its familiar weight in his hands, but unable to remember what it opened. The feeling of frustration washed over him again, but the girl's presence somehow calmed him. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lily. And you?" "James. James Sinclair." From that day on, a strange bond formed between the amnesiac businessman and the street girl. Lily regularly appeared in James's room, bringing small flowers she picked from the hospital garden or drawings she made with pencils borrowed from the nurses. For James, those visits were the only moments of peace amidst the confusion his mind had become. It was during one of these visits that Dr. Evelyn Reed entered the room. The 34-year-old psychologist had been called in to help with James's memory recovery. With her brown hair tied in a simple bun and her ever-watchful green eyes, Evelyn inspired immediate confidence. She stopped at the door when she saw Lily sitting in the chair beside the bed, drawing while chatting quietly with James. There was something about the scene that touched her deeply, an unexpected tenderness that contrasted with the harshness of the hospital environment. "Sorry to interrupt," she said softly. "I'm Dr. Reed, the psychologist. I've come to speak with Mr. Sinclair." Lily looked at her with curiosity, her big eyes studying every detail of the psychologist's face. There was something familiar about this woman, something that made her heart race without her knowing why. "She can stay," James said, referring to Lily. "She helps me feel calmer." Evelyn sat down, opening her folder of documents. During the session, she noticed how Lily watched everything intently, as if she were memorizing every word, every gesture. There was a brilliant intelligence in those childish eyes, a perception that went beyond her age. When Evelyn mentioned memory recovery techniques, Lily suddenly spoke up. "My grandma always said that memories are kept in the heart, not in the head. She said that when you really love someone, you never forget, even when your head gets confused." The girl's words sent a strange shiver down Evelyn's spine. There was something in the way she spoke, in the premature wisdom of her words, that brought back memories from her own childhood that she preferred to keep buried. After the session, while walking through the hospital corridors, Evelyn couldn't get Lily out of her head. There was something about the girl that awakened conflicting feelings in her, a maternal tenderness she had buried 5 years ago after losing her own daughter, and an inexplicable restlessness that grew with each encounter. That night, in her simple but cozy home on the outskirts of Oak Creek, Evelyn sat before the photograph she kept on her bedroom dresser. The image showed a 3-year-old blonde girl, smiling angelically at the camera. Her daughter, Sophia, who had left this world in an accident that still haunted her every night. "Why does that girl make me think of you, my love?" she whispered to the photograph, feeling the tears she had tried to hold back for so long finally streamed down her face. A week had passed since James woke up in the hospital, and the sessions with Evelyn became part of his daily routine. The psychologist tried different techniques to awaken his lost memories, but the last 6 months of his life remained a blank page, frustrating and haunting. Lily continued to appear regularly, always with her colorful drawings and her quiet presence that brought peace to the tense environment. During one rainy morning, while Evelyn was conducting another hypnosis session with James, The girl sat in the corner of the room, drawing with absolute concentration. "Try to remember the last day you were at home," Evelyn said softly, watching James closely. "What did the house smell like? What sounds did you hear?" James closed his eyes, forcing his mind to search for lost fragments. The smell of strong coffee, very strong, and voices, raised voices, an argument. Who were you arguing with? "I don't know, I can't see the face, but there was anger, a lot of anger." At that moment, Lily looked up from her drawing and said naturally, "When people fight, a lot, sometimes one pushes the other. My grandma always said that anger makes us do bad things." Evelyn felt a chill run down her spine. There was something disturbingly specific in the girl's observation, as if she knew more than she should about James's situation. 3 days later, James was discharged from the hospital, but continued with outpatient sessions. That's when Catherine Sinclair appeared at the hospital for the first time. The 52-year-old woman entered Evelyn's office with the cold elegance of someone used to being in command. "Doctor, I need to talk to you about my husband," Catherine said, her blue eyes as cold as ice. "I'm concerned about this obsession he's developed for that street child." Evelyn watched the woman carefully. Catherine wore expensive clothes, discreet but valuable jewelry, and there was a hardness in her features that contrasted with the apparent feminine fragility she tried to project. "Obsession is a very strong word, Mrs. Sinclair. Your husband simply finds comfort in the presence of the girl who saved him." "Saved him?" Catherine laughed bitterly. "That girl is an opportunist. Street kids always are. She must be expecting some kind of reward. Lily is only 4 years old. Age doesn't matter. They learn to manipulate early." Evelyn felt an immediate dislike for this woman. There was something cruel in the way Catherine talked about Lily, a coldness that bothered her deeply. "Where were you when your husband was found in the square?" Evelyn asked directly. Catherine hesitated for a fraction of a second before answering, "Taking care of business. Sinclair crystals can't just stop because my husband had an accident. You didn't find it strange that he left home and didn't come back? James has always been unstable. Ever since he took over his father's business 10 years ago, he's had anxiety attacks. It wasn't the first time he disappeared for a few days." But Evelyn noticed the tension in Catherine's voice, the way her fingers nervously played with the strap of her expensive handbag. That afternoon, when James arrived for his session, Evelyn decided to approach the subject differently. Lily was present, as always, drawing in her corner. "James, your wife came to see me today. She's worried about you." "Catherine?" James's eyes hardened. "She has reason to be worried. What do you mean?" "I can't explain it, but when I look at her, I feel anger, a deep anger, as if she did something terrible." Lily looked up from her drawing and stared intently at James. "Mr. James, is there a big tree in your backyard?" James seemed surprised by the question. "Yes, there is. A large oak tree. How do you know? And is there a doghouse but no dog?" "There was. Rex died 2 years ago." James leaned forward, intrigued. "Lily, have you been to my house?" The girl shook her head but continued. "And is there a lady with grey hair who always swept the yard early in the morning?" James's heart sped up. "Eleanor, she was our housekeeper until—" He stopped abruptly, a fragmented memory emerging in his mind like a flash. "Until she disappeared a few months ago." Evelyn watched the interaction with growing unease. How could a 4-year-old girl know such specific details about James's house? "Lily," she said gently, "how do you know these things about Mr. James's house?" The girl looked at her with her large, innocent eyes. "My grandma Eleanor always told me about the place where she worked. She really liked her boss, said he was very kind, but that the boss's wife was mean. To her, A heavy silence filled the room. James and Evelyn looked at each other, both processing the shocking revelation. "Your grandmother, Eleanor Cordero?" James asked in a trembling voice. "Yes. You know my grandma?" Lily's eyes shone with hope. "Do you know where she is?" "I've been looking for her since the flood." James covered his face with his hands, fragments of memories beginning to fit together like pieces of a macabre puzzle. Eleanor had worked in his house for 15 years. She was an honest, hard-working woman who always spoke fondly of her granddaughter. She had disappeared abruptly a few months ago, and Catherine had said she simply stopped showing up for work. "Eleanor disappeared," he said quietly. "Your wife said she gave no notice, just stopped coming." Tears began to stream down Lily's face. "My grandma would never leave without telling me. She always said I was her treasure." Evelyn knelt before the girl, her maternal heart fully awakening. "Lily, honey, when was the last time you saw your grandmother?" "On the day of the big rain. The water took our little house and I held her hand, but the current was too strong." The girl's voice broke. "I looked for her everywhere, but I couldn't find her." James stood up abruptly, the golden key appearing in his mind as an important symbol. "The key," he murmured. "My mother's house. Eleanor had the keys to my mother's house." "What house?" Evelyn asked. "My mother passed away 3 years ago. The house was closed up, but Eleanor would go there once a week to clean and check on things. She was the only person I trusted." A sudden memory hit him like a lightning bolt. Eleanor running up to him one morning, agitated, saying she needed to talk about something important she had seen, but he was late for a meeting and asked to talk later, a later that never came. "I need to go to my mother's house," he said, determined. "Maybe the key opens something there." "I'll go with you," Evelyn said impulsively. "If Eleanor is really Lily's grandmother, I need to help find her." Lily held Evelyn's hand tightly. "Are you really going to help me find my grandma?" "I will, my dear, I promise." But what Evelyn didn't know was that there was much more connecting her to Lily than a simple coincidence. At her home that night, while organizing some old documents for the next day's session, she found a birth certificate she had kept for years without ever having the courage to examine closely. It was her own certificate, and on it was written the name of her biological mother, Eleanor Cordero. Evelyn's hands trembled as she held the yellowed paper. For all these years, her adoptive mother, Alzira, had told her that her biological mother was a young woman who couldn't raise a child. She had never mentioned the name, always changing the subject when Evelyn asked. "It can't be," she whispered to herself. "It can't be a coincidence." But deep in her heart, a painful and extraordinary truth began to emerge. Lily wasn't just a lost girl who had saved James in the square. She was her niece, her own niece, the granddaughter of the woman who had given birth to her 34 years ago. And if Eleanor had really disappeared from the Sinclair house under the same mysterious circumstances surrounding James's amnesia, there was something much more sinister happening than any of them imagined. Mrs. Eulalia Sinclair's house was in the oldest part of Oak Creek, where the cobblestone streets told stories of decades past. Evelyn drove her red Ford Focus through the narrow streets, with James in the passenger seat, holding the golden key as if it were a talisman, and Lily in the back seat, observing everything with curious and hopeful eyes. The discovery of the birth certificate had kept Evelyn up all night. For 34 years, she had lived without knowing that Eleanor Cordero, the woman who cleaned the Sinclair's house, was her biological mother. And now, that same woman's granddaughter was sitting in her car, trusting her to find the missing grandmother. "It's that house. And there," James said, pointing to a colonial-style building painted light blue, with peeling wooden windows and a small garden that clearly hadn't been tended to in months. "My mother loved this house. She lived here for 50 years. Evelyn parked in front of the iron gate. The property looked abandoned, with weeds growing between the path stones and dry leaves piled up on the porch. "Mr. James," Lily said softly, "my grandma always talked about this house. She said it had many happy memories, but also some sad ones." "What kind of sad memories?" Evelyn asked, trying to hide the anxiety in her voice. "She never really told me. She just said that once she had to make a very difficult choice here, and that it still hurt her heart." James opened the gate with difficulty, the rust resisting the movement. When they entered the house, a smell of must and loneliness greeted them. The living room was covered with white sheets protecting the furniture, like silent ghosts guarding secrets of the past. "My mother's safe is in her bedroom," James said, climbing the wooden staircase that creaked with every step. "If the key opens anything, it must be there." The master bedroom was spacious, with a wrought-iron double bed and an old rosewood dresser. Behind a painting of the Holy Family, James found a small safe built into the wall. The golden key fit perfectly into the lock. Inside the safe were documents, some old family jewelry, and a manila folder yellowed with age. James opened the folder with trembling hands and found papers that made his blood run cold. "Purchase and sale agreements," he murmured, examining the documents. "Land belonging to Sinclair Crystals sold to Morris Construction for prices far below market value." Evelyn came closer, reading. Over James's shoulder. "These contracts have your signature," she observed. "But I never signed these," James said, his voice growing louder. "I never authorized the sale of these lands. They are essential for the company's expansion." Lily, who had been quietly exploring the room, stopped in front of a photograph on the bedside table. It was a black and white image of a young woman holding a baby. "Aunt Evelyn, come look," she called. "This lady looks like you." Evelyn approached the photograph and felt the world spin around her. The young woman in the photo had her own green eyes, the same face shape, the same sweet expression, and on the back of the photo, in neat handwriting, was written, "Eleanor and her daughter, 1990. "My God," Evelyn whispered, holding the photograph with trembling hands. "It's my mother. It's really my mother." James looked up from the documents, seeing Evelyn in shock. "What are you talking about?" "Eleanor is my biological mother," she said, tears beginning to stream down her face. "I found out last night. Lily is my niece." The silence that followed was charged with complex emotions. Lily looked at Evelyn with a mixture of confusion and hope. "Are you my family?" the girl asked in a small voice. "I am, my dear. I'm your aunt." Lily ran into Evelyn's arms, who hugged her tightly, feeling her heart break and mend at the same time. For 5 years since losing Sophia, she had avoided any emotional connection with children. Now, discovering she had a niece, that she had family she never knew existed, was overwhelming. James continued to study the documents when he found something that made him turn even paler. "There's a letter here," he said, "written by Eleanor." He read it aloud. "Mr. James, if anything happens to me, you need to know that I saw Mrs. Catherine forging your signature on the company papers. She's selling the land to her brother, Oswald Morris. I tried to talk to you several times, but she always found an excuse to send me away when I got close. I'm afraid of what she might do if she finds out I know. Please take care of my granddaughter Lily if I can't make it back home. She's all I have in this world. Eleanor Cordero." The silence that followed was deafening. James held the letter as if it would burn, his hands slowly processing the betrayal he had uncovered. "Catherine," he murmured, pieces of memories beginning to fit into his mind like a macabre puzzle. "She was stealing from the company." "And Eleanor found out," Evelyn added, holding Lily tighter. "That's why she disappeared." Suddenly, fragments of memories began to rush back to James like violent waves. The argument in the kitchen at home, Catherine screaming that he was being paranoid, that Eleanor was just an envious housekeeper trying to cause trouble. He remembered seeing the suspicious contracts in the office, questioning the strange transactions. "I remember now," he said, his voice growing stronger with anger. "I confronted Catherine about the sales. She said I was imagining things, that the stress was driving me crazy. But I insisted, said I was going to investigate everything." "And then?" Evelyn asked. "She pushed me. I hit my head on the corner of the kitchen table. I remember the pain, the blood, and then nothing." "She left you in the square," Lily said, with the cruel simplicity of children. "My grandma always said that bad people do bad things when they get caught." A fury grew inside Evelyn. Catherine had not only tried to steal from her husband's company, she had done something terrible to Eleanor to silence her, and if it weren't for Lily finding James in the square, he might have died right there. "We need to go to the police," she said. "No," James replied firmly. "First, I need to confront Catherine. I need to hear from her own mouth what happened to Eleanor. That could be dangerous. She's been my wife for 15 years. I know her. Catherine is calculating, but she's not violent by nature. What happened to me was an accident resulting from anger, not a plan. But, even as he said it, James wasn't sure. The woman he thought he knew had revealed herself to be a stranger, capable of betrayal and manipulation. What else was she capable of? Evelyn looked at Lily, who she now knew was her niece. The girl had lost her grandmother, had survived alone on the streets for 2 months, and now discovered she had family she never knew existed. But where was Eleanor? Was she alive? Or had Catherine done something irreversible to silence the only witness to her crimes? "Aunt Evelyn," Lily said softly, "you're going to help me find my grandma, right?" "I will, my dear. I promise we'll find out what happened to her." But as she made that promise, Evelyn felt a cold pit in her stomach. If Catherine was capable of trying to kill her own husband to hide her crimes, what would she have done to a housekeeper who discovered her secrets? That afternoon, when they returned to the city, James made a decision that would change everything. He would go home to confront Catherine, but not alone. Evelyn and Lily would accompany him, hidden, to ensure his safety and to have witnesses to whatever his wife might reveal. What they didn't know was that Catherine was already aware that James had recovered part of his memory, and that she had spent the last few days preparing a plan to ensure that this time no one would survive to tell the truth. The Sinclair mansion was quiet when James arrived in the late afternoon, followed discreetly by Evelyn and Lily, who remained hidden outside. The garden, once impeccably cared for by Eleanor, now showed signs of neglect, with dry leaves scattered across the lawn and withered flowers in the beds. James entered through the main door, feeling the weight of the documents he carried in his leather briefcase. Each step echoed through the marble hall, amplifying the tension growing in his chest. Catherine was in the living room, elegantly dressed as always, sipping red wine while flipping through a design magazine. "Darling, I'm glad you're back," she said without looking up from the magazine, her voice sweet, but with a coldness he now clearly perceived. "How was the session with that psychologist?" "Very enlightening," James replied, placing the briefcase on the coffee table with a thud that finally made Catherine look at him. "I've recovered some important memories." "How wonderful," she said, but her eyes narrowed slightly. "I hope they're happy memories." "Actually, they're very disturbing memories." James opened the briefcase and spread the forged documents on the table. "Especially these signatures that are clearly not mine." Catherine's face paled, but she tried to maintain her composure. "James, you're still confused from the blow. Those are your signatures." "No, Catherine. And I have a letter from Eleanor explaining how you forced her to witness your forgeries." The mask of innocence finally fell from Catherine's face. She stood up abruptly, knocking the wine glass onto the Persian rug. That meddling old woman didn't know her place. "Where is she, Catherine? What did you do to Eleanor?" "What did I do?" Catherine laughed bitterly. "I did what I had to do to protect our future. You were always too weak to make the tough decisions." Outside, Evelyn held Lily tightly, both listening to the conversation through the slightly open window. The girl trembled, sensing she was about to discover something terrible about her grandmother. "Eleanor blackmailed me," Catherine continued, her voice becoming shriller. "She said she would tell you everything if I didn't stop the sales. As if a housekeeper could threaten me." "So you hurt her?" "I just took her far away from here, to a place where she couldn't cause any more trouble." James felt his blood run cold. What place? A retirement home on the outskirts of the city, a very simple place where people like her belong anyway. "Is she alive?" Catherine hesitated for a moment, and in that hesitation James saw something that both reassured and horrified him. "For now." "My God, Catherine, how did you become this person?" "I became the person you never had the courage to be," she screamed. "While you were worrying about scruples and sentimentality, I built an empire. Those lands were unproductive, James. Oswald is turning them into a residential complex that will generate millions. By stealing from my company, our company, I managed everything while you were sinking into depression after your mother's death. I made the contacts, closed the deals, made the tough decisions." During this argument, something extraordinary happened outside. Lily, who had remained quiet until then, suddenly broke free from Evelyn and ran towards the back of the house. "Lily, come back here," Evelyn whispered, running after the girl. But Lily had stopped in front of a small building at the back of the garden, an old servant's cottage that looked abandoned. Her childish eyes had noticed something the adults hadn't: a small window with a curtain that moved slightly, as if someone were on the other side. "Grandma?" she called out softly. "Grandma, is that you?" Evelyn approached and heard a faint sound coming from inside the small house. She tried the door. It was locked, but the lock was old and gave way easily when she forced it. What they found inside changed everything. Eleanor Cordero, 72 years old, was lying on a simple bed, clearly weak and confused, but alive. Her eyes lit up when she saw Lily. "My little granddaughter," she whispered in a weak voice. "I knew you would find me." "Grandma, I looked for you everywhere." Lily threw herself into her grandmother's arms, crying with relief. Evelyn knelt by the bed, looking at the woman who had given birth to her 34 years ago. Eleanor looked at her with curiosity, then with growing recognition. "You have my daughter's eyes," she whispered. "The daughter I had to give away so she could have a better life." "I am your daughter," Evelyn said, tears streaming down her face. "I'm Evelyn." Eleanor closed her eyes, tears of joy and pain mingling on her aged face. "My God, you've grown up so beautiful. I thought I'd never see you again." Meanwhile, inside the main house, the argument between James and Catherine had reached a critical point. Catherine had pulled a revolver from a drawer in the bookshelf, pointing it at her husband. "You will not destroy everything I've built," she said, her voice trembling but determined. "Not after all my sacrifice." "Catherine, put the gun down. Let's handle this civilly." "Like you handled Eleanor, by accepting her blackmail, by being weak as you've always been." It was at that moment that Evelyn entered the house through the back door, carrying Lily and supporting a frail Eleanor. "No need for weapons, Catherine," Evelyn said calmly. "I've already called the police. They're on their way." Catherine turned, seeing Eleanor alive and the two people who would completely ruin her plans. In a moment of desperation, she pointed the gun at Lily. It was then that something no one expected happened. Eleanor, though weak, threw herself in front of her granddaughter, protecting her with her own body. The gun fired, but the bullet only hit the ceiling, as James had managed to disarm Catherine at the last second. The police arrived minutes later, finding Catherine in shock, and Oswald had already been arrested at his construction company. The corruption and fraud scheme was completely uncovered, and Sinclair Crystals would be restored under James's honest management. In the months that followed, a new family was formed. Evelyn resigned from the hospital and opened a private practice, mainly serving families in vulnerable situations. Eleanor recovered completely and went to live with her and Lily, finally reuniting 3 generations of women who had been separated by fate. James, free from Catherine's manipulation and with his memories fully recovered, became a father figure to Lily. The company thrived again, and he created a social fund to help children on the street in honor of the brave little girl who had saved his life that fateful day in the square. During the traditional Oak Creek Founders Day festival held at St. Sebastian's Church, where it all began, Lily made a revelation that surprised everyone. In front of the gathered community, she told how she had recognized Evelyn at the hospital. "My grandma always showed me a picture before I went to sleep," she said in her sweet voice. "It was of the daughter she had to give away for a better life. She told me that one day we would meet when God willed it. When I saw Mr. James fallen in the square and then met Aunt Evelyn at the hospital, I knew that was the sign my grandma always talked about." Eleanor hugged her granddaughter and her daughter, tears of gratitude streaming down her face. "God truly has his ways," she said. "He used a tragedy to bring us together again." James looked at his new family, not of blood, but of choice and love. The golden key that Lily had saved didn't just open a safe, but unlocked hearts that had been closed by pain, guilt, and loneliness. Evelyn held Lily on her lap, finally understanding that the emptiness she had felt since losing Sophia had been filled not by a child identical to the one she lost, but by a niece who needed the love she had to give. And Lily, the brave girl who saved a stranger in the square, had found not only her lost family, but had also shown everyone that sometimes angels come disguised as street children, and that true love always finds a way to reunite those who belong to each other. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story with a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.